Listen closely. Can you hear it? That's the sound of a heart learning to beat in captivity. There's an old Armenian legend about a man who captured a phoenix and kept it in a golden cage. Every morning the bird would sing, not songs of fire and rebirth, but lullabies for its own funeral. The man thought he'd preserved something eternal. What he'd actually done was create the world's most beautiful corpse. This is what we do to love when we try to make it permanent. We take something wild, something that breathes only in moments of absolute presence, and we suffocate it with promises, contracts, routines. We build elaborate tombs called relationships and wonder why the thing inside stops moving. Jung understood this perversity. He saw how we project our unlived lives onto others, how we fall in love not with people, but with the missing pieces of ourselves. Your lover? They're wearing a mask you painted in your sleep. And here's the delicious horror. They're doing the same to you. I once knew a man who kept every love letter he'd ever received in a mahogany box. Hundreds of them, yellow with age, smelling of lavender and decay. He'd read them every anniversary, weeping for women whose faces he could no longer remember. "This is love," he'd say, holding up paper that crumbled at his touch. No, my friend, that's taxidermy. The modern world has perfected this embalming process. Dating apps serve us preserved specimens, profiles sanitized, photos filtered, personalities reduced to bullet points. We swipe through a museum of possibilities, each one already dead before we meet them. A 2024 study from Northwestern found that 73% of online daters report feeling emotionally numb after 6 months of digital courtship. Of course they do. You can't fall in love with a hologram. But here's where it gets exquisitely dark. We prefer it this way. Real love, the kind that cracks you open like an egg, that makes you forget your own name, terrifies us. It's too raw, too unpredictable. It might demand we change. It might reveal the lie we've been living. So we choose the cage. We choose the routine. We choose the slow, comfortable death over the violent rebirth. Kierkegaard wrote about this in his journals, though they burned most of those pages. He called it the seduction of security, how we murder possibility in exchange for certainty. Your Wednesday night dinner dates, your synchronized morning routines, your predictable bedroom choreography, these aren't expressions of love. They're the silk lining of a coffin. The truly grotesque part? We teach this to our children. We point to couples who've been together 50 years, who can no longer see each other, who move through their shared life like ghosts haunting the same house, and we call it relationship goals. We celebrate golden anniversaries, golden like the cage that broke the phoenix. I've watched passion die 1,000 times. It always happens the same way. First comes the comfort, then comes the routine, then comes that terrible moment when you look at your lover and see not a person but a habit. They become furniture in the museum of your life, necessary, familiar, utterly invisible. There's a couple I observe at my local cafe. Every Sunday, same table, same order. They don't speak anymore. They've said everything. Now they just sit, two people sharing a table and nothing else, reading their phones like parallel graves. Last week, the woman wore a new perfume. The man didn't notice. Why would he? You don't notice the scent of earth when you're already buried. Here's what Jung knew that we pretend not to. Every lover is temporary because every projection eventually fails. The mask always slips. The person you thought you loved reveals themselves to be startlingly, disappointingly human. And instead of loving this real person, this flawed, complex, unknowable other, we simply find a new screen for our projections. Serial monogamy. The art of changing theaters while watching the same movie. But what if we stopped? What if we let love remain wild, momentary, untamed? What if we accepted that genuine connection exists only in flashes, in the space between breaths, in the pause before a kiss, in the silence after truth has been spoken? The Sufis have a practice. When they feel love becoming routine, they deliberately destroy it. They leave, they change. They refuse to let the divine feeling calcify into expectation. Cruel? Perhaps. But watch their eyes when they speak of love. Still burning, still alive. So here's my question for you, whispered like a secret you shouldn't hear. What are you more afraid of, losing love or discovering it was already dead? Think carefully. Your answer might be the key to your cage. The longer you stare, the less of you it reflects. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was, "Notice me," and the darkness comprehended it not, for the darkness was too busy taking selfies. There's a monastery in Tibet where they keep no mirrors, not one. The monks believe that every time you look at your reflection, you lose a piece of your soul. Superstitious nonsense, we say. Adjusting our ring lights, checking our angles, curating our existence for invisible audiences. But what if they're right? I'll tell you something that will make your skin crawl. You haven't seen your real face in years. What you've seen is a performance, a careful construction of angles and expressions you've practiced until they feel natural. You've become so good at being watched that you've forgotten how to simply exist. Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear for the world. But he lived before Instagram, before the panopticon of perpetual performance. He couldn't have imagined how we'd volunteer to live in glass houses, how we'd make exhibitionism into a religion. Last month, a woman in Stockholm died taking a selfie, backed off a cliff while finding her perfect angle. The photo survived. She didn't. In it, she's smiling, radiant, #living her best life. The rescue team said she was still holding her phone when they found her, still gripping that little black mirror that promised to make her immortal. But here's the truly sick part. She got 100,000 likes, posthumously viral. Her death mask more popular than her life ever was. We've turned Narcissus's curse into an aspiration. But the myth got one thing wrong. Narcissus didn't fall in love with himself. He fell in love with an image that looked nothing like him. Water lies. Mirrors lie, and we've built a civilization on these lies. A Harvard study from 2025 found that people now spend an average of 7 hours daily managing their online image. That's 56 days a year. Nearly 2 months annually spent not living but pretending to live. And for what? For hearts and thumbs from strangers who are doing the same thing, trapped in the same recursive hell of mutual performance. Schopenhauer saw this coming. He wrote about the hedgehog's dilemma, how we need others for warmth, but our closeness hurts. So, what did we do? We invented digital proximity. All the validation, none of the vulnerability. We can be intimate without being known, loved without being seen. I watch people on dates now. They don't look at each other. They look at how they look together. They take photos of their food before tasting it. They document their happiness so thoroughly, they forget to feel it. One couple I know broke up but stayed together for 3 more months because they'd already posted about their anniversary trip. The relationship was dead, but its image needed to live until the content calendar was complete. The ancient Greeks had a word, kenosis, self-emptying. They meant it as a spiritual practice. We've perverted it into something else. We empty ourselves not to find God, but to become a more appealing container for others' projections. Here's what happens when you live for the mirror. You begin to disappear. Not all at once. That would be merciful. No, it's gradual, like forgetting the taste of water. First, you lose your private thoughts. What's the point of an unshared idea? Then your genuine reactions. Which emoji represents actual feeling? Finally, you lose the ability to exist without witness. A tree falls in the forest and immediately wonders why no one filmed it. I knew a painter once, brilliant, tormented, real. She created in secret, her studio a sacred space where beauty and ugliness danced without judgment. Then she joined social media, started sharing her process. Within a year, she was painting for the algorithm, creating what would photograph well rather than what moved her soul. Her technique improved, her art died. Now she has 50,000 followers and nothing to say. The most insidious part? We know it's killing us. Every study confirms it. The anxiety, the depression, the gnawing emptiness that comes from performing instead of being. Yet we can't stop. We're addicted to the lie the mirror tells, that we exist only when reflected in others' eyes. But solitude, real solitude, the kind where no one is watching, not even yourself, that's where you find the face beneath all faces. It's terrifying. Most people would rather die than meet themselves without a filter. And so they do die, incrementally, post by post, story by story, until all that's left is a very photogenic ghost. The Buddhists have a meditation where you stare at your reflection until it becomes unrecognizable. They say, if you do it long enough, you'll see your true nature. Try it, but be warned. What looks back might not have your carefully crafted smile. It might not even have a face you recognize. It might just be empty space where a person used to be. So tell me, in a whisper meant for no audience, when was the last time you did something without wondering how it would look to others? When was the last time you felt a feeling and didn't immediately translate it into content? Can you even remember? Every man carries his father's ghost to bed. Shh. Lean in close. I'm going to tell you why you fuck the way you do. It starts with a boy watching a door that never opens, or opens too often, or opens only to reveal a stranger wearing his father's face. That boy grows up, and one day he's in bed with someone who says they love him, and suddenly he's that child again, waiting for something that never comes. Jung mapped the architecture of our souls and found father-shaped craters everywhere, not metaphorical fathers. The actual man who was supposed to teach you how to be human, and instead taught you 17 ways to disappear. In Romania, there's a folk tale about empty chairs that grow heavier each year. Families keep them at their tables for the fathers who left, and gradually these chairs sink through the floor, through the earth, straight down to hell. But here's the twist. The families keep setting places for them, every meal, forever, feeding an absence that grows fat on their devotion. This is what we do in our beds, in our hearts, in our desperate 3 a.m. texts. We keep feeding ghosts. A 2024 University of Copenhagen study tracked the eye movements of men during intimate moments. You know what they found? In 67% of cases, men's eyes went vacant at the moment of climax, not from pleasure, but from departure. They called it traumatic dissociation through intimacy. I call it the family reunion nobody invited you to. Your body remembers everything. Every time your father turned away. Every moment you needed him and found empty air. Every lesson about manhood that came through silence, through absence, through the peculiar violence of indifference. And now, years later, there you are, trying to love someone while your nervous system plays a highlight reel of abandonment. Nietzsche wrote that we are condemned to eternal recurrence, doomed to live the same life over and over. He was wrong about the cosmic part, but right about the personal. Watch a man in love, and you're watching him recreate his first wound, casting his partner as either the father who must be pleased or the father who must be punished. I've seen it 1,000 times. The man who can only feel desire when he's being rejected, still chasing daddy's approval. The one who sabotages every relationship at the 3-month mark, leaving before he can be left. The one who needs constant validation, trying to fill a hole shaped like a Sunday baseball game that never happened. But here's where it gets exquisitely twisted. Women carry their fathers too. That first man who taught them their worth, or their worthlessness. The one who showed them what male love looks like. Whether that was protection or possession, presence or pathology. There's a couple I've been observing. She chose him because he's emotionally unavailable, just like Daddy. He chose her because she demands the impossible, just like Daddy expected. They're not making love. They're staging a reunion between ghosts. Their bed is a seance where everyone's invited except the people actually in it. The Japanese have a word, mukoku seiki, to be without nationality, without roots. That's what father absence creates. Sexual refugees, intimate orphans wandering between bodies looking for home. But home was never a place. It was supposed to be a person, and that person was busy. Some try therapy. They sit in beige rooms and talk about their feelings until the words lose meaning. They do inner child work, scream into pillows, write letters to fathers who'll never read them. And maybe they feel better for a while. But then night comes, and skin touches skin, and suddenly they're 8 years old again, wondering why love feels like leaving. The Catholic mystics believed in something called the dark night of the soul, a spiritual desolation where God feels absent. What they didn't say is that for most of us, that dark night started at the dinner table, watching an empty chair, learning that love is just another word for waiting. Here's the secret that would break us if we let it. We're all orphans pretending to be adults. Every passionate kiss carries the aftertaste of absence. Every orgasm is both a little death and a little birth. Dying to find daddy, being born into his continued absence. A man in Berlin told me he collects father figures, older men, mentors, bosses, therapists. He seduces them with his need, makes them promise to stay, then destroys the relationship when they get too close. I'm testing them, he said, to see if they'll fight for me. They never do. The test is designed to fail. The father who would fight for him exists only in the space between heartbeats, in the pause before disappointment becomes familiar again. So, we feast on absence. We make banquets of our abandonment. We invite lovers to dinner and serve them our oldest wounds, garnished with desperate hope. And when they can't fill the emptiness, because no one can fill another person's emptiness, we blame them for not being the father we needed, the one we're still waiting for. But here's the beautiful horror. Sometimes, in the darkest moment of intimacy, when all the ghosts are howling and the absence feels like drowning, sometimes grace breaks through. Not healing, exactly, but recognition. You see your wound in their wound. Your ghost waves at their ghost. And for one impossible moment, you're not alone in your aloneness. It doesn't last. It can't. But it's enough to keep us trying, keep us opening, keep us offering our bodies like questions to answers that died before we were born. Now here's my riddle for you, wrapped in velvet and thorns. What if the father you're looking for in every lover's arms is actually yourself? What if every absence you're trying to fill is just the space where your own sovereignty should be? Sit with that. Let it ruin you properly. Where men go to shed the names that were never theirs. Once upon a time, which is to say, right now, in this very moment, a man realized he had been performing his entire life in a play he never auditioned for. Listen, do you hear that sound? Like silk tearing? That's the sound of identity coming apart at the seams. It happens to every man, usually around 3:47 a.m., when the world is quiet enough to hear the lies we tell ourselves. One moment you're secure in your role, husband, provider, success story. And the next, you're staring at the ceiling, wondering whose life you're living. The Aztecs had a ritual. When a warrior felt he'd lost himself to his reputation, he would walk into the jungle and dig his own grave. He'd lie in it for 3 days, letting the earth eat his name, his stories, his careful, constructed self. If he survived, he emerged nameless, free to become anything. Most men preferred to die as heroes rather than live as nobody. Sound familiar? We're all dying as heroes of stories we didn't write. Your personality, your preferences, your entire identity. It's a costume you put on so long ago you've forgotten it's not your skin. Jung called this process individuation, but he was being polite. What it really is controlled demolition. I met a CEO last year, Fortune 500, corner office, the whole testosterone opera. One day, he was sitting in a board meeting about to close a billion-dollar deal when he heard himself speaking and didn't recognize the voice. Who is this person? He thought. Who is performing confidence through my mouth? He excused himself, walked to the bathroom, and couldn't remember his own name for 7 minutes. Not wouldn't, couldn't. His brain simply refused to connect him to the character he'd been playing. He quit that afternoon. Now he makes ceramic bowls in New Mexico and cries every time it rains. He's never been happier. He's never been more terrified. He's never been more real. This is the Garden of Unbecoming, where you go to compost everything you thought you were. It's not a peaceful place. Gardens never are, despite what the poets say. Things rot here. Things scream as they transform. The soil is made of every mask you wore to be loved, every performance that earned applause, every lie that kept you safe. A 2025 study from the Jung Institute in Zurich found that 89% of men experience what they termed identity vertigo by age 40, a sensation that their life belongs to someone else. But here's what the study didn't say. This isn't a crisis. It's an invitation. The vertigo is your soul's way of saying, "Wrong costume, try again." Kierkegaard knew this. He wrote about the sickness unto death, not physical death, but the death of being trapped in a self that isn't yours. Most men choose the sickness. It's safer than the cure. The cure requires you to disappoint everyone who loves your performance. The cure demands you become a stranger to your own life. In rural Japan, there's a practice called forest bathing, spending time among trees to heal the soul. But the locals know a secret the tourists don't. Sometimes the forest takes more than it gives. Sometimes you walk in as one person and walk out as no one at all. No one. They have a name for these people. Kagebito, shadow people. Not because they lack substance, but because they've learned to exist between definitions. I'll tell you something that will crack you open. Every man is two people. There's the one the world sees, successful, stable, performing his gender like a trained seal. And there's the one who exists only in the spaces between breaths, who knows that success is a cage with golden bars, who understands that every achievement is just another costume that doesn't quite fit. The second man is the real one. He's also the one we're trained to murder. Watch a man in his garden of unbecoming. He'll start by pulling off the obvious masks, the job title, the social role, the good son routine. But then comes the harder work. Who are you without your anger, without your ambition, without the story of your wounds? Who are you when there's no one to perform for, including yourself? Most men run from this garden. They feel the first identity loosen and panic, grabbing for another mask, another role, another way to be something instead of nothing. But the bravest ones, the ones who've been broken just right, they stay. They let themselves dissolve. They become compost for something they can't yet imagine. There's a therapist in Vienna who specializes in male identity dissolution. He doesn't help men find themselves. He helps them lose themselves properly. His office is full of men weeping, not from sadness, but from relief. The relief of finally admitting, I have no idea who I am. The relief of stopping the performance, even for an hour. But here's the paradox that would make Jung smile. You can't become yourself until you're willing to be no one. The Garden of Unbecoming isn't about finding your true identity. It's about discovering you were never just one thing. You're the spaces between definitions, the pause between names, the silence after the applause stops. Some men emerge from this garden transformed. They move differently, speak differently, love differently. They've learned the secret. Authentic power comes not from being somebody, but from being comfortable being nobody. They've traded their resumes for presence, their reputations for truth. Others never leave the garden. They become gardeners themselves, tending the decomposition of other men's false selves. You can recognize them by their eyes, soft and terrible, like they've seen through the world's makeup to the skull beneath. They're the ones who ask the dangerous questions, who give you permission to fall apart. So here's my invitation, whispered like a serpent in your garden. What would die if you stopped performing your life? What version of you would cease to exist if there was no one watching? And more terrifyingly, what might be born in that empty space? The garden is waiting. The soil is hungry for your masks. The only question is, are you brave enough to feed it? In the end, a man must marry his own darkness. The candle flickers. The hour is late. And I have one last secret to tell you, though it may cost us both our sleep. Inside every man lives a monster. Not metaphorically, not poetically. A real, breathing thing with teeth and hunger and terrible wisdom. We spend our lives trying to kill it, cage it, medicate it into submission. We call this being civilized. We call this being good. We call this the reason we're dying. Let me tell you about the cathedral of necessary monsters. It exists in that place between sleeping and waking, where truth comes dressed in shadow and speaks in tongues of fire. Every man has been there, usually against his will, dragged by crisis or circumstance to face what he's been running from his entire life. The Gnostics knew about this. They called it the sacred marriage, not between man and woman, but between a man and his own rejected nature. They built entire cosmologies around this reunion. Modern psychology renamed it shadow work and filed off its teeth. But the teeth are the point. The monster needs its teeth. In medieval Prague, there was a rabbi who created a golem, a creature of mud and magic, to protect his people. But here's the part they don't tell you. The golem wasn't made from river clay. It was made from the rabbi's own refused anger, his swallowed pride, every harsh word he'd never spoken. He gave his shadow form and set it loose. It saved everyone. It destroyed everything. Both things were necessary. This is what Jung understood when he spoke of integrating the shadow, not taming it, marrying it, consummating a union with everything about yourself that makes you uncomfortable. I know a man who spent 40 years being good. Perfect husband, perfect father, perfect citizen, never raised his voice, never broke a rule, never felt alive. Then one night, his monster came calling, showed up in his dreams wearing his own face, laughing at his careful life. "You've been a ghost," it said. "Let me teach you to haunt properly." He started saying no. First to small things, overtime, obligations, other people's emergencies. Then to bigger things. His marriage built on politeness, his job that paid in numbness, his entire identity as everyone's salvation. His family called him selfish. His friends called him changed. His monster called him home. A 2024 Berkeley study on dark trait integration found something fascinating. Men who consciously engaged with their shadow aspects, anger, selfishness, destruction, reported 74% higher life satisfaction than those who suppressed them. But here's what made the researchers nervous. These men also became unemployable in traditional settings. They couldn't pretend anymore. They'd tasted their own power. The monster isn't evil. That's the first lesson of the cathedral. It's energy, raw, immoral, magnificent. It's every impulse you've strangled in the name of being nice. It's the part of you that knows how to take up space, to want without apology, to destroy what needs destroying. Without it, you're not good. You're domesticated. There's a difference. Nietzsche called this amor fati, love of fate, including the fate of being human, which means being capable of both creation and destruction. But we've built a world that wants only your creative side, your productive side, your manageable side. Your monster is bad for the economy. Your monster asks uncomfortable questions. Your monster knows that some things need to burn. In the forests of Siberia, shamans have a practice. When a young man comes of age, they send him into the wilderness to meet his shadow animal. He must let it attack him, devour him, digest him. Only when he's been fully consumed can he be reborn with his power intact. Some men never return. Those who do are changed, wilder, quieter, impossible to control. We don't have forests anymore. We have therapists and life coaches and pharmaceutical solutions. We have 1,000 ways to avoid the cathedral, to postpone the wedding, to live as half a person pretending to be whole. But the monster is patient. It waits in your rage at traffic, in your fantasies of escape, in that moment at 2 a.m. when you want to howl at the moon but don't because the neighbors might hear. It's waiting for you to stop being afraid of your own nature. Here's what happens when you finally enter the cathedral. You realize the monster was never separate from you. It was you, the you that got buried under expectations, conditioning, other people's comfort. The you that knows some bridges need burning, some relationships need ending, Some polite lies need shattering. A sculptor in Barcelona told me he doesn't create art. He destroys marble until beauty emerges. That's what the monster does. It destroys what's false in you. It's violent work, sacred work, necessary work. The wedding ceremony is simple. You stop running. You turn around. You look at everything about yourself you've been taught to hate. Your selfishness, your rage, your hunger, your desire to break things. And you say, "You're mine. You've always been mine. Welcome home." And then you're dangerous. Not to others. Truly integrated monsters rarely lash out. You're dangerous to systems that require your compliance. Dangerous to relationships that feed on your diminishment. Dangerous to the part of you that would rather be loved than alive. Some men live their entire lives as tourists in their own existence, taking photos of a life they're not actually living. They die well-behaved, well-regarded, and half-complete. Their monsters die with them, unexpressed, taking with them all the beauty that comes from wholeness. But you who've listened this long, who've let these dark words curl around your conscience like smoke, you have a choice. The cathedral doors are always open. The monster is always waiting. The wedding can happen whenever you're ready to stop pretending you're only light. So, here's my final question, posed at the edge of everything you think you know about yourself. What would happen if you stopped being good and started being real? What would happen if you let your monster teach you its songs? The candle is almost out. The hour is later than you think. And somewhere in your chest, something with teeth is smiling, waiting for you to smile back.